What would you do if you woke up tomorrow and money just wasn't a worry anymore? Like completely off the table. Not winning the lottery, but just knowing it's taken care of.
Wow.
Think about it. How different would your day be? Your work? Would you even be in the same job? Would you be in the same relationship?
It really makes you think, huh?
It cuts to the core of so many of our choices.
Yeah.
And it's exactly why we're diving into financial freedom today. And I know when you hear that, you might think, oh, here we go, another get-rich-quick scheme.
Right. Become a millionaire overnight.
Yeah, but that's not what this is about. This is about something way more practical. It's based on a fascinating study from El Camino del Estoico.
Okay.
It's actually a PDF called Alcanzando la Libertad Financiera, which translates to, you guessed it, achieving financial freedom.
Makes sense.
And what they talk about is not being a millionaire, but simply not having to worry about money.
Not having that constant stress.
Exactly. And the best part is, it might be closer than you think.
That's encouraging.
Oh, it is. So our mission today is to dig into this document, pull out the most important stuff, and figure out what it really takes to get to that point where you can just breathe easy, financially speaking.
That's good.
All right, so let's start with the first big idea. You have to stop being just a consumer and start thinking like a creator. Think about it. Why do we mentally spend our paychecks before we even get them?
Right.
Always thinking about that next thing to buy. What do you think is going on there?
Well, I think we're just bombarded, with ads, with social media, with everyone showing off what they have.
Like we were programmed to consume.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes it really hard to step back and think about what you can create, what value you can bring.
And that's where the whole Stoic idea comes in, right?
Control what you can control.
Your mindset. You can absolutely choose how you view this stuff.
Yeah.
So they have this really interesting exercise to help with it. They say write down everything, and I mean everything you bought last month, and then categorize it. Necessary, unnecessary, and get ready for this, stupid.
Stupid. Wow.
I know, right? But think about it. How many of our purchases fall into that category? I bet it's more than we'd like to admit.
Yeah, probably. But why do we do that? What's behind those stupid buys?
Well, I think a lot of it is emotional. That instant gratification. Maybe we had a bad day and a new gadget will make us feel better.
Oh, for sure. Or we see someone else with something and we feel like we need it too.
The classic keeping up with the Joneses.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. So to combat that, they have this brilliant question they want you to ask before you buy anything. Does this make me more free or more dependent?
That's a good one.
Right. Because it completely changes your perspective.
Yeah.
It's not about how cool that thing is, but about the long-term impact on your life.
Will I be tied to this purchase somehow?
Exactly. Will it drain your resources or will it actually give you more control?
I like that.
Okay, so we're starting to shift our mindset. Now, here's where things get a little tricky.
Okay.
A lot of people think the answer to financial worries is just making more money. But the source actually says the first step should be spending less.
Oh, interesting.
So why do you think they prioritize that? Why not just focus on earning more?
Well, I guess if you don't know how to manage what you have now,
Yeah.
having more won't magically fix it. You'll just find new ways to spend it.
They have this great analogy. It's like trying to fill a leaky bucket.
Huh.
You got to plug those leaks first. And then they give us a solid tip, the 50-30-20 rule.
Okay, I've heard of that. What is it again?
50% of your take-home pay goes to needs, 30% to wants, and 20% to savings and investments.
Makes sense.
And they don't mess around. They literally say, can't do it. You're living beyond your means.
Straight to the point.
No sugarcoating there. But they also acknowledge it can be hard to track all of this, so they recommend using budgeting apps like Mint or Fintonic.
Those can be helpful.
Oh, incredibly. I remember when I first started using one, I was shocked at how much I was spending on coffee.
Oh, yeah, those little things add up.
You really do. All right, so we're getting our spending under control. The next big thing is building multiple income streams. And they're really adamant about starting this today.
Not putting it off.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So why do you think that is? Why is just relying on one job so risky these days?
I mean, look at what happened with the pandemic, right? And layoffs are happening all the time.
Nah.
And the economy can be so unpredictable.
And then you've got AI taking over some jobs.
It's a lot to worry about.
It is. Having multiple streams of income is like having that safety net.
So you're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And they give some really practical ideas for this. Freelancing, things like design, writing, even video editing.
There are platforms for that, right?
Yeah. Upwork, Freelancer, there's a ton. Then there's the whole world of digital products.
Like ebooks and online courses.
Exactly. The beauty of that is you create it once and you can sell it over and over again.
That's smart.
And then there's finding ways to monetize your hobbies.
Ooh, really?
Yeah, like if you're a great photographer, offer photo shoots. If you speak another language, do tutoring.
I never thought about it like that.
There are so many possibilities. Okay, now let's talk investing. I know it can sound scary.
Yeah, like something only rich people do.
Exactly. But they're really clear that investing is for everyone, especially if you want to, not have to work forever.
Right. Break free from that 9 to 5 grind.
So for someone who's completely new to this, what do they suggest?
Well, they're big on index funds.
Okay.
Those baskets of stocks that track a specific market index, like the S&P 500.
Yeah, I've heard of those. But they seem kind of complicated.
They can be, but they're actually a good way to get started because they're less risky than individual stocks.
Good.
And they've historically had good returns over the long term.
The long term. That's key, right?
Absolutely. This isn't about getting rich quick. It's about slow and steady growth.
Patience.
Exactly. And there are even apps that make it super easy to get started, like Robinhood, in the US.
And what about for people outside the U.S.?
Oh, yeah, there are options too, like GBM Plus in Mexico.
Cool.
But the biggest thing they emphasize is to be wary of those miracle investments.
Right. If it sounds too good to be true.
It probably is.
Always a good reminder. Okay, moving on to something a little less glamorous. Debt. Specifically, consumer debt.
Ugh, the worst.
The source calls it the silent enemy of financial freedom. Those interest payments are basically chains holding you back.
I feel that.
We've all been there. So why is it so important to tackle that debt head on?
Well, because every dollar you're paying in interest is a dollar you can't save or invest.
It's like you're constantly running but getting nowhere.
Exactly.
They have a few strategies for getting out of debt. One is the snowball method. Have you heard of that?
I think so.
You basically focus on paying off your smallest debts first to build momentum. You get those quick wins, and it motivates you to keep going.
That makes sense. Psychological boost.
Exactly. They also say you should try to negotiate lower interest rates with your creditors.
Really? You can do that.
It's worth a shot. You'd be surprised how often they're willing to work with you. And then their advice on credit cards is pretty blunt. They say treat them like a toxic ex.
Ouch.
Only use them if you can pay off the balance in full every month. Otherwise, you're just digging yourself a deeper hole.
Good advice.
Okay, now let's talk about safety nets. We're not talking about being paranoid here.
Right.
More like being smart and prepared. They call this having a stoic safety net,
Okay.
an emergency fund. And they are very clear on how much you need.
I think it's like 6 months of expenses.
3 to 6 months, actually. They
Yeah.
say this is non-negotiable. It's that cushion that protects you if you lose your job or have a big unexpected expense. And they say keep it somewhere accessible, but not so accessible that you're tempted to dip into it for non-emergencies.
Makes sense. Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. Okay, now here's a factor that we don't always consider. The people we surround ourselves with.
To our friends and family.
Yeah. They have this really funny line. They say, if your friends spend money like reggaeton artists on a yacht, it's going to be hard to save.
Aha. That's a good one.
Right. They're basically saying, surround yourself with people who inspire you to improve, not to go into debt.
So how do we build that kind of supportive network?
Well, they suggest following financial education accounts on social media. But be careful. There's a lot of bad advice out there, too.
Oh, yeah.
Then there were the classics, books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and The Richest Man in Babylon.
I've heard of those.
They're great for building that financial foundation. And then there are tons of online communities, forums, subreddits, even discords, where you can connect with people who have similar goals.
It's about finding your tribe.
Exactly. Okay, now this next one is all about making things easier on ourselves, automating our finances. Because relying on willpower alone, that's tough.
Especially when you're tired or stressed.
Exactly. So what do they recommend automating?
Well, first and foremost, your savings. Set up automatic transfers from your checking to your savings account.
Makes it painless.
Then automate your investments too. Most platforms have features that allow for regular contributions.
Perfect.
And finally, don't forget about bill payments. Automate those to avoid late fees and all that headache.
So you're basically setting up systems that work in the background.
That's the goal. Less stress, less chance of mistakes.
I love it. All right, now here's a concept I find really empowering. defining your freedom number.
Your freedom number.
Yeah, it's basically the total amount of money you would need to have invested or generating passive income so you could cover all your expenses without working.
Wow, that's the dream.
It is. And they emphasize that this number is different for everyone. It depends on your lifestyle, your needs, your goals.
So how do we figure out our own freedom number?
They give a simple formula. First, you add up all your essential monthly expenses. Housing, food, transportation, all that.
Okay.
Then multiply that by 12 to get your yearly expenses.
All right.
Then they suggest adding a 10% buffer, for inflation or unexpected stuff.
Makes sense.
And that's it. That final number is basically the yearly passive income you need to be truly financially free.
Interesting.
So instead of just wanting more, you have a concrete target.
I like that.
All right, now this next principle is super important, even though it might not sound very exciting. It's about living below your means.
Even when you get a raise.
Especially when you get a raise. Why do you think that is?
Because it's easy to get caught up in lifestyle inflation, right? As you earn more, you start spending more.
Exactly. They call it getting stuck in a more luxurious cage.
You're still trapped, just with fancier bars.
And they give some really practical tips for avoiding this trap. Like, don't buy a new car just because you got a raise. Invest that money instead.
Okay.
Increase your savings rate every time your income goes up.
Makes sense.
And find joy in things that don't cost a lot of money. Going for walks, reading, spending time with loved ones.
Simple pleasures?
It's about shifting your values away from material possessions and towards experiences and freedom.
I like that.
Okay, so now you're building assets, you're saving, you're investing. The next step is protecting all of that.
Ah, right.
They talk about insurance,
Yeah.
wills, legal documents. It can feel overwhelming, but they break it down to the essentials.
What are those?
First, you got to have health insurance. That's non-negotiable, especially in
Yeah,
everywhere, really.
for sure.
Then life insurance, if you have people who depend on your income, you want to make sure they're taken care of if something happens to you.
Absolutely.
And finally, a basic will. That way your assets are distributed according to your wishes, and there's no legal mess for your loved ones to deal with.
Good point.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And I know it can all feel kind of daunting, but they acknowledge that. They say there are no shortcuts.
No magic bullet.
But every step you take, no matter how small, gets you closer. They even quote Marcus Aurelius. He said, "The life of each one is subjected to the present. The past has disappeared, and the future is uncertain."
That's deep.
It is. Basically, don't wait. Start now. And they end this section with this powerful line. Start today with what you have, as you are.
I love that.
And then they do this amazing summary they call the Stoic Financial Summary.
Okay.
And it's so good. They say, don't complain about what you can't control. Change what you can. Don't seek social approval. Seek real progress. Don't chase more money. Chase more freedom.
Powerful stuff.
And then they end it with this beautiful line. True wealth is needing little and living knowing that the money works for you, not the other way around.
That is freedom.
They wrap up the whole thing with a call to action. Ready to start your journey. And their signature sign-off, Esto es el camino del estoico.
I'm feeling inspired.
Me too. So just to recap, this deep dive into Alcanzando la Libertad Financiera has given us a roadmap for achieving financial freedom. And it's not about becoming a millionaire. It's about reaching that point where money is no longer a constant source of stress.
It's about taking control, being intentional with our choices.
Exactly. And it all starts with that shift in mindset.
Thinking like a creator, not just a consumer.
And then it's about managing our spending, building multiple income streams, and making smart investments.
And remembering it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Patience is key. So as we wrap up, I want you to think about this. How might changing just one small habit, based on what we talked about today, impact your relationship with money?
And your overall sense of well-being.
Exactly. What resonated with you the most? What feels like the most important thing for you to focus on right now?
What questions do you still have about taking control of your financial life? And what are you ready to start doing differently starting today?